Welcome to the Oxbridge Explainer series of videos featuring me, Christopher Paris. Today we're going to talk about why CMMC is D.O.A. dead on arrival. All right, so first of all, saying something like CMMC is D.O.A. is a pretty inflammatory statement. So let's look into why I'm going to say that and why I think that that's based on actual fact and how I'm going to show that this is going to happen. So first of all, what is CMMC? Let's ask that question. CMMC is a program rolled out by the US Department of Defense, and it's called the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Program. The intent is that every company within the defense industrial base will undergo some level of CMMC certification. And some of those levels will just be a self-certification for low-risk companies, and then high-risk companies will have to go through a third-party certification. Any company in the DIB, the defense industrial base, will have to achieve this CMMC certification in order to provide any kind of a contractual product or service to anybody in the federal government. Right now, it'll be Department of Defense, but the CMMC program intends to roll that out across all federal government. So for now, yeah, Department of Defense. If you're serving the DoD and you're in that defense industrial base, eventually you're going to see this CMMC certification requirement flow down to you. The CMMC certifications are going to be issued by the next level in this pyramid. That's a group of company called the C3PAOs, and that's the CMMC third-party assessment organizations. They're going to be the certification bodies that come in and audit your company to determine whether or not you're compliant to CMMC and then grant you that CMMC certification. The C3POs themselves are going to be managed by an organization that was set up by the Department of Defense called the Cyber AB, or the Cyber Accreditation Board. Now, they used to be called the CMMC Accreditation Board, or CMMC AB. They renamed and rebranded themselves. Now they're the Cyber AB, right? So the Cyber AB is the next level of that pyramid, okay? And we can see that we're seeing increasing levels of oversight and authority, with the Cyber AB sort of being near the top of the pyramid. So let's take a look here. What do we have? This is the contract that the DoD created to form the Cyber AB. Now, how they did it, it's pretty shady. It's a little bit outside the scope of this video, but essentially the DoD said, well, we're going to have the private industry form this single monopoly organization, a private organization, and they're going to manage that. And of course, the DoD people involved in that helped set that up so that their own personal friends and colleagues within the consulting industry could do that, and that's what the Cyber AB is. So there's a legal argument as to whether or not the Cyber AB is legal to begin with, but for now it exists. And the DoD then granted a non-competitive sole source contract between the DoD itself and the Cyber AB to be this authority that will oversee all CMMC accreditations. In that contract, however, it says something like this. Well, it says this. The CMMC AB, and again, now that they're called the Cyber AB, shall achieve compliance with the current ISO 17011 standard. Now that standard, which is now you're into my area of expertise, the ISO standards, right? The ISO 17011 standard is assigned or intended for accreditation bodies. It defines the rules on how they're going to operate to ensure that they're trustworthy and not embedded with conflicts of interest, etc. So the DoD said, yeah, okay, we're going to create the AB, but the AB must comply with ISO 17011. And to ensure that, it then says the Cyber AB shall become a full member of something called the Inter-American Accreditation Cooperation, or the IAAC. Now, the IAAC oversees accreditation bodies. They're the ones that are going to audit the Cyber AB to make sure that they're complying with this standard called ISO 17011. Now, here's a screenshot of the IAAC website. Now, let's zoom in. What is the URL? What is the domain name of the IAAC's website? It is iaac.org.mx. This is because the IAAC is a Mexican organization. They're out of Mexico. Now here's their LinkedIn page. Shows their map, where their location. Their headquarters is in Mexico City. Got a big dot right in the middle of the country of Mexico. This is not a secret. Everybody's known this for years. Within the ISO industry and the private sector ISO, this is not a conflict. It's not a scandal or anything. But this starts to get a little bit weird when the Department of Defense is handing over the control of this scheme to a Mexican organization. So now we've added, we can see the next level of this pyramid is the IAAC. Has higher authority than the Cyber AB, and yet they're out of Mexico. This is again per the DoD's own contract, right? So now, where does the IAAC get its authority from? Well, the IAAC is itself what's called a regional accreditation group of a higher organization still called the IAF. So if we go back and we look at that DoD contract with the Cyber AB, we find out that, okay, the Cyber AB, formerly the CMMC AB, must become ISO 17011 accredited. That accreditation is going to be granted by the IAAC, but the IAAC only does so acting as a regional body for this group called the IAF. So we have to find out who the IAF is. The IAF is the International Accreditation Forum. And what they do is they oversee all the accredited ISO certifications around the world. So whether it's ISO 9001 for quality, ISO 14000 for environmental, the ISO 17011 for accreditation bodies, all of those are overseen by one organization called the IAF. There's no escaping that, right? Well, where do they operate out of? And this gets a little bit weird. First of all, the website we can see is iaf.nu. That's a Swiss website. So the website is registered in Switzerland. The company itself is a U.S. company registered in Delaware. They're filed as a 501c3 nonprofit in the United States, subject to U.S. laws. Okay, so they are registered in Delaware, but then they're managed by a single person called Elva Nilsson out of her house in Canada. So that's a little bit strange, right? And then they have a rotating presidency. And the presidency, I want to be clear on this. The presidents of the IAF are not figureheads. They actually have authority. They make decisions and they have power. So let's look at who their presidents have been. The current president is this guy, a guy named Emanuele Riva, and he represents the Italian accreditation body called Accredia. And he was elected recently. He took over, I think, about a year or two ago. So again, he's representing Italy. But now he's taken over as the president of the IAF. The problem with Riva is that he is a supporter of Vladimir Putin and Russia and the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Why? Because the Italian accreditation body, Accreditation, actually sells accreditation services within Russia. So they are violating both the EU sanctions as well as United States sanctions against Russia, and they're completely violating those by selling services in Russia. So he's not about to use either his role as the head of Accredia or the role of the IAF to denounce Russia. He's a supporter of Russia and Putin because he's making money out of that country. And this is documented, by the way. And we're not making this up. This is public information. There's nothing particularly secretive about that. That's our current president of the IAF. But who was the prior president? Again, he was just elected a few years ago. Who was running IAF prior to that for a period of 9 years? This guy, Zhao Jianhua of CNAS, the Chinese National Accreditation Service. That's the official accreditation body of China. And again, he ran the IAF for 9 years. Okay? Now, during his tenure, and let me just be clear, Zhao Jianhua is a Chinese Communist Party member. That's not a surprise because any government representative of the China, and he works for the government, has to be, under law, a CCP member, so that's not a surprise. But let's be clear, that's what he is. But specifically, during his 9 years, he used his role in the IAF to promote specific Chinese Communist Party policies. And you're not going to believe me, so I'm going to show you. Here is a speech he gave in 2017. And you can see the link there. There's the source, the official cnas.org.cn website. It's in English, so you can click on it and link and jump to it and go read this speech yourself. In 2017, while he was holding the position of head of IAF, he used that role to promote the Belt and Road policy, Belt and Road trade policy, which is a very controversial Chinese Communist Party policy. So he was directly invoking the name IAF in promotion of a Chinese Communist Party policy. What does the U.S. government have to say about the Belt and Road? Well, here is, 2023 testimony from the House Foreign Affairs Committee before the U.S. Department of the State, which declared the Belt and Road policy as coercive. And if you do some research, you'll find out the United States has been opposed officially to this Belt and Road policy. But here we have the head of a U.S. organization registered in Delaware, who happens to be a Chinese Communist Party member, using that position to promote this policy that the Department of State later called coercive. So that means that at the top of the pyramid now, this is the CMMC pyramid. We have at the bottom, we have the defense industrial base. That's companies like yours that have to get certified, right? You're going to get certified by a C3PAO. That C3PAO organization is itself going to be accredited by the AB, but the AB is going to get its authority from two organizations, the IAAC out of Mexico and the IAF, which is run by Italy and China, foreign actors. Now, just to be clear, even though Italy currently holds the presidency, Zhao Jianhua did not let go of power. He remains highly influential, and I'm going to show you that evidence of that in a minute. But then we have the other problem is that, yeah, the Italian guy who is running it supports Russia. And of course, within the IAF, we have Mexico in the loop as well through this other organization, the IAAC. So that becomes a problem. Now I want to show something else. There's another organization, and if you skip this part, it's fine, but there's another organization called CAICO or CAICO, okay? That's the Cybersecurity Assessor and Instructor Certification Organization. Now, per the Department of Defense's contract, it said the Cyber AB will spin off an organization called CAICO. The CAICO will train and certify CMMC assessors. And then the Cyber AB, being an accreditation body, that's in their name, the AB means accreditation body, they're going to accredit CAICO. But it was important that CAICO be a separate organization from the Cyber AB, otherwise you have this conflict of interest. That's in the DoD contract right now, except that that's not what is happening. Instead, the Cyber AB has simply refused to sell off CAICO. They're just refusing for years now. Instead, they're operating it themselves. The same board of directors, one of the board of directors just switched over and joined that organization. It's the same organization. So the Cyber AB is accrediting itself. That's a conflict of interest. It's a violation of ISO 17011. It guarantees that the Cyber AB cannot legally achieve 17011, but that's what's happening. Now imagine if you as a defense contractor simply refused to comply with the Department of Defense contractual obligation. You would be fined. You might even be there might be a criminal trial for defrauding the government. But here the Cyber AB is just simply refusing. They're saying, we're going to do it someday, but they have no plan to do it. So they're just not doing that. They're not spinning off CAICO. The other thing is this. Let's see here. The next part is the Cyber AB is supposed to accredit CAICO. Well, because they're not spinning it off, they've decided they're not going to abide by that contractual obligation anyway. And they've chosen another organization called ANAB, and they said ANAB is going to accredit CAICO instead. Again, that's not what the DoD contract says. That's just something they decided, and they're just going to do it. They're going to ignore the contract, and they're going to have ANAB accredit the organization that's going to certify all the CMMC assessors and trainers. The problem there, again, is ANAB is accredited by the IAAC in Mexico and the IAF in Italy and China. So you're right back to that. Even the auditors that are going to be going around and doing the CMMC assessment, even they are going to be overseen by Mexico, Italy, and China. So remember, the DoD, in their contract, because the DoD people involved were so stupid, they granted final oversight authority of the entire CMMC program to the IAF, meaning this guy in Italy who supports Putin and this guy in China who has a documented history of using that role to promote Chinese policy. Now remember, the CMMC program is supposed to be protecting us from China. And yet the DoD handed ultimate control of the scheme to actual China. Now, because you still don't believe me, I'm going to show you something that proves this. What you're seeing now is an actual complaint filed by me in 2021 against one of the IAF's accreditation bodies. It was a different one. It's irrelevant, but still within this ISO 17011 scheme. Identical, right? And you can see this email is the response coming back from the IAF secretary, Elva Nilsson, who is from Canada. So we're getting an email back to me. This is dated August 6, 2021, from Canada. And in it, it is CC'd a few critical people. Zhao Jianhua in China, Emmanuel Riva in Italy, and Mario Andrade Castro in Mexico. These are the people who are going to adjudicate, or who are in this case adjudicating and making final decision on this complaint within this IAF scheme. This is inevitable. So this is documented. And I have more emails like this. There's a lot of emails where I've been filing these complaints, by the way, for over a decade, maybe 15 years. So there's tons of this documentation where I file a complaint and it eventually escalates all the way up to the IAF, and we see all these foreign actors getting involved in the final decision-making process. This is very common. And again, within the private industry of ISO certifications, it's not particularly controversial. But now we're dealing with a DoD official program that is supposed to be protecting us from China. And yet we see this documented evidence that China is involved in the final decision-making of these kind of complaints. Now, under ISO 17011, it's important to know something else. In this pyramid, okay, each level audits the level beneath it. So the IAAF and the IAAC are going to audit the Cyber AB. That audit's probably going to happen once every 2 or 3 years, okay? The Cyber AB is then going to audit the C3PAOs, and they're going to audit them every 2 years or so. And the C3PAOs will then audit your defense industrial-based companies for CMMC. So the pyramid goes downward when it comes to the assessments, right? Okay, but the opposite is true for any kind of appeals process. Now the pyramid flips over. So for example, the appeal process moves upward. So let's say you're a DIB company and you're going through a CMMC audit, right? In the middle of the audit, the assessor, the CMMC assessor, maybe he shows up drunk. Maybe you just disagree with a finding. Maybe he says, this is a finding and I'm gonna give you a low rating, and you disagree. You say, no, we have the evidence. There's some problem that happens, and problems are gonna happen during these audits. It's inevitable, right? What you would do is you would file a complaint with the C3PAO. That's the company that sent it that auditor, right? Well, now, if you don't like the response by the C3PAO, you can escalate it. And this is all per ISO 17011 and the IAF rules. These are rights afforded to you as a company that's being audited. So if you don't like the C3PAO's response, you then can escalate it to the Cyber AB. And the Cyber AB is required to have policies and procedures that give you the right to do so. Now, the Cyber AB gets it. Let's say you don't like their response. You now have the authority and the right to escalate it further to the IAF and the IAAC. So that means that each level has appeal authority over the levels beneath it. So complaints and appeals are going to go upwards. And of course, what does that mean? That the DoD has granted the final authority over all CMMC matters related to both the audits and the auditors to foreign actors. And again, that email that I showed you was just one example of them weighing in on a decision that had reached all the way up, that went up that pyramid, went all the way to the top, and was then being adjudicated by Italy, China, Mexico, and Canada. So now I'm going to show you what we're going to do with that information. Essentially, this is how, okay, we're going to kill CMMC in the cradle. Even though this thing has been around for a long time, it's not yet fully born yet, right? And of course, this is my evil plot. This is my villain plan. This is that I'm plotting from my underground volcano lair, okay? And I'm making it completely public so everybody knows exactly what's going to happen. There are no surprises here. And in fact, I've already told both the Cyber AB and the DoD that I'm going to do this. So they know this is happening. And yet, out of hubris or stupidity, they're not fixing this problem. And it's astonishing, okay? First, all I'm going to do is we're going to wait for the first fully accredited CMMC certification to be issued. Doesn't matter to who. Any defense industrial-based company, doesn't matter. First, second one, it's going to be sometime in the beginning. But as soon as I hear of one, okay, we're going to wait for that. And that's going to be one that's issued by an actually fully accredited C3PAO. Of course, that may never happen. We have not, the CMMC, the Cyber AB has no plan on how it's going to get actually accredited, and it doesn't look like they intend to. But let's pretend that they are going to do that. At some point, they're going to issue a CMMC certificate, and it's an official one. And at that point, what are we going to do next? We're going to file a complaint with that C3PAO. Again, doesn't matter what company it was, and it literally can be about anything. Doesn't matter. I'm just going to file a complaint, okay? And the complaint will probably be about something legitimate. I'm sure I'm going to find some problem, with their assessment. But it's irrelevant. I'm just going to file a complaint with the C3PAO, okay? And it'll probably be citing some kind of conflict of interest that we'll find or whatever. Next, when the C3PAO responds back to me, they're going to reject it. They're going to give me some grief or whatever. Fine. I'm simply, it doesn't matter what their response is, I'm now going to escalate it to the Cyber AB as a right afforded to me and everybody else under 17,011, right? Then next, what we're going to do is we're going to reject the CyberAB's response, no matter what that is, and we're going to escalate it to the IAAC in Mexico. Again, that is the plan and the process under ISO 17011 and the IAF scheme. And then at the same time, we're going to reject whatever IAAC says, and we're going to escalate it to the IAF. I may do all of that all at once. All right. But at that point, I'm going to have the same kind of email documentation that I just showed you, where now the IAF is responding back to me about a complaint I filed against a U.S. company that was certified by a U.S. certification body, a C3PAO, by the U.S. CyberAB, and yet now we're going to have documented evidence of Mexico and Italy thinking about how they're going to respond to that, okay? And guess what? Under the DoD's contract, as it's written, any one of those parties, which means Mexico, Italy, China, they can choose to side with the complaint and say this complaint is valid and we're going to de-accredit the CyberAB. We're going to strip them of their ISO 17011 status. And guess what? That wipes out the entire CMMC program. That means the decision whether or not CMMC will survive or not will be left in the hands of Mexico, Italy, and China, right? Now, Italy, probably not going to do anything. They don't want to cause problems. But right now, we have a government that keeps saying they want to invade Mexico. So Mexico's not on our side right now. And certainly China has a vested interest in making sure that CMMC dies, okay? And we're going to hand them, because of the DoD's own contract, we're going to hand them that ability to do that. And China's, they may rule. And it won't matter how ridiculous my complaint is. China's probably going to rule and say, yeah, you're right. We're going to strip the CyberAB of its 17011. They'll have the authority to do that. And now you don't have a CMMC program at all. No one gets certified. No one gets audited. The whole thing is shut down. Sounds dramatic, but this is what can happen. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that email chain, regardless of whether or not the IAC, the IAF, whoever respond, but now we're going to have that documented email showing them involved in the decision-making process, right? And I'm going to send that to the Senate Armed Services Committee. I'm going to send that to the House Armed Services Committee. We're going to send it to DODIG, the GAO. We're going to pick certain senators, and of course Rubio is going to be one of them because he's loving this, right? We're going to send it to Rubio, and we're going to show the DoD signed a contract handing over ultimate authority over CMMC to China. And of course, we'll send that to the media as well, right? So what do we do though? All right. So I'm not here just to destroy this and just to be a troll and to make sure that China has a better cybersecurity program than we do or to give China the authority. I'm trying to point out that DoD has been blindingly stupid, incompetent, absolutely, criminally incompetent in creating this scheme in order to just make a CyberAB that their friends could go, make a lot of money on. Right. And by the way, a lot of the people involved, like Katie Arrington and everything who created this, well, what did they do? They ran off, they quit government, and they formed consulting companies selling CMMC services. So, it was all a money-making scheme. But this thing has been criminally incompetent, and I want to fix it. And here's how we're going to fix it. First of all, we're going to demand, and of course, at this point now, I'm going to have the House and Senate on my side, and Rubio and these people on my side. We're going to go back and say, here's the fix. Simple. You throw out that contract with the CyberAB. Okay? Just get rid of it, start over, all right? Next, in the new contract, the DoD agrees that it will take over the role that it previously had granted these foreign actors. The DoD is going to do that. They're going to accredit the CyberAB to ISO 17011. They're going to do the audit. They're going to go in and audit the CyberAB to ISO 17011. U.S. people from the U.S. Department of Defense will do that, not Mexico and China and all these other countries, all right? We're going to eject the IAAC and the IAF entirely from the scheme. They're not going to be involved at all, right? And the DoD can pay for all of this, which, by the way, is not going to cost them a lot of money. They're going to have to hire maybe one person to do these audits, and maybe, the same person can manage the program over the course of a year. You're talking about adding one person in their salary, right? But let's say the DoD is really super cheap and they still want this to be a zero-cost contract. They just take that money and they embed that into the fees paid by each DIB company, each DIB company. So everybody who goes through an audit, there's going to be a small administrative fee tacked on. My calculation is that when you calculate the number of DIB companies, right, since the cost of the DoD will be largely fixed, their audits they'll only have to audit one accreditation body, so it's not going to go up, right? When you start to divide that against all the companies that have to get certified, you're talking about adding like $8, $9, $10. That's it. It's going to be, it's less than a cup of coffee, as they say in those commercials, right? So I mean, it's just dollars. It's not hundreds of dollars. It's not thousands of dollars. It's not tens of thousands of dollars. The DoD is going to flow this down. They're going to embed an administrative fee inside there, and their entire budget for the CMMC program is going to be covered in that tiny little fee. They just have to do their math correctly, right? And then next, they have to spin CAICO out separately. They got to sell it. They needed to do that originally, and they didn't. And then the Cyber AB, once it's a separate organization, they're going to accredit CAICO per the original agreement. Kick ANAB out because ANAB is, again, being overseen by Mexico and China. They cannot be part of it. Now, the Cyber AB is supposed to be an AB. That's in their name. So they're supposed to accredit the C3PAOs and the auditor training organization through CAICO. So now that's what they're going to do. And then again, the DoD is going to ensure that the Cyber AB conforms to ISO 17011 by doing an annual audit of them against that standard. All right, so what does that get us? Now, the DoD actually has skin in the game, because right now they don't. They've created this monopoly organization out of thin air, they call the ecosystem or whatever, and the Cyber AB, and they just created it just to give some money to their pals, right? Well, no, now that all goes away, and now they have actual skin in the game. They've got to hold some responsibility, and somebody in the CMMC office, program office at DoD, actually has to do something, okay? And then the next thing is that you've eliminated the foreign actors. There's no more foreign actors in this scheme. Now everybody can relax. Rubio can relax. Senate Armed Services can relax. House, and now you have a functioning cybersecurity scheme that cannot be overruled or adjudicated by China, Mexico, Italy, or any other foreign country.